Good morning. Just a super quick one this morning. On the desk is a 80s bunch of music for a podcast, and we're having a quick look today at the typical 80s gated snare reverb. So I've gone with a C78 core drum rack. I've replaced a couple of the hits, but generally this is what we're looking at. Okay, so 80s snares, at least some of them were well known for this gated reverb. So within drum rack, I have my snare there. Now if I turn on all of these things, so show hide chainless, so here are all my different samples, and turn on sends and my returns. When you initially click on returns, we have this drop audio effects bracket here, and we can rack up any effects that we want. So for example, I could get the in-house Ableton reverb, toss it there. So now we have A, B, C sends. Note that we have A send, B send, and C send. If I was just to duplicate that again, note that send D will suddenly appear. Paching. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that. Simple highlight and delete. I'll leave this one up. I'm going to turn off the Valhalla one that I was working with. Actually, I will show you what was happening there first. So there's my C7 MIDI information. We'll talk about that later. Send A, send B. So this is where my Valhalla reverb is. And here the specifics there, but nothing particularly amazing. Just a big enough reverb to give me a push. Okay. That is then followed by this gate, and on that gate, let me just move some stuff around so you can see. Okay, on that gate, let's get this track running. So I've set the threshold just under the peaks. Like with a compressor, the gate has a threshold, but it's compressing at 1,000 to infinity to So basically, okay. So as that threshold is, ignore that 1,000 to 1. I was sleepy, without coffee, and confusing my limiters and gates. Okay, gates. Thresholds, just like compressors and gates, but in this case, the threshold is determining when that door is going to open up and let the audio through. So if I set my threshold too high, none of that audio gets through. If I bring it down just under that peak, I've got that gate opening, letting that reverb through, and then closing. So I can get more detail with that window of when the gate is open, between the relationship between threshold and return. Not all gates have return, but it helps things get a little tighter. We'll discover that if we ever do a deep dive into gates. Okay, tossing that on loop again. Okay. So, solo that snare. To hold is how long that gate is open for. Attack is how long it takes for that gate to open and allow the sound through. And release turn those down, you can see via the waveform shape here that it's actually cutting off a lot quicker. I wanted a more natural decay, so I'm just winding up this release, and it's gating or closing down or turning the sound down by -40. This can be 100% silent, but -40 is effectively almost silent. Okay, so that is my gated reverb. Within drum rack, I'm using the sends and returns, turning them on here, dragging a reverb down, Valhalla in this first instance, going over to my send, sending an amount of this snare to this reverb without the gate. That reverb just continues for however long this decays. So too much of a smushy mess, but even with a large decay like that, I can still cut it by implementing our gate. There it's a bit too cutty, so I would experiment with a longer release tail. I'm going to just bring that the decay to normal-ish amount, double check that. Tighten up that release. Okay, in this particular example, I wanted that reverb more mono, so I've just used utility, turn that on, and decrease the width. That is my 80s gated reverb. I'll show you that with Ableton's in-house reverb. Turning off Valhalla. We've got that dry snare now. I'm going to send C to my C audio effect. Oh. Crank that up. Turn that reverb up. Just going to open up this reverb. Okay, I want it 100% wet. I'm getting the dry signal via this signal chain. Okay. There's that big reverb. Turn off spin, chorus, anything a little bit weirder than that. I'm going to do the mono vibe by decreasing stereo here. Okay, too big a reverb tail for my liking and for this particular project. So, gate. Wow. Tossed in there. Okay, threshold's set too high. Nothing is exceeding that threshold and opening the gate. So bringing that down. Okay, The peaks are opening that gate, but it's closing a little bit too artificially for my like. Just extending that release just to get a little bit more of a slowly fading cutoff. Which one do you prefer? I think I prefer the Ableton Reverb at the moment. That might be just because I'm sending different amounts. So I'll send equal amounts. Change this release shape. Your call. Anyway, you've been with Chris Hancock on a quick stream of 80s snare, reverb, gating tricks. This is all happening within our Ableton drum rack, but can be more simplified if we had just a MIDI track dedicated to our snare and we were putting our reverb and gate on either of these returns. Hope you're well, happy producing. Peace.